Morning, everyone, and thank you again for coming to one of our webinars. And I'm really delighted to have Viv here today. Morning, Viv.
Morning, Jonathan.
And it's a really bleak morning out there, but I'm going to say it's not going to be bleak talking to Viv today, because whenever I listen to Viv, and it's been for many years, I'm always, I come away with so many ideas, so many thoughts, and ways or strategies to actually improve what I'm doing as a leader. And so I'm just in awe of what she does and how she does it. And we had the great privilege to go to a book launch a couple of months ago, which was such a lovely event. And yeah, and listening to all those wonderful speakers and how she has influenced them over the time and things like that. And yeah, it's such a journey and a pleasure to listen to you speak, Viv. So I'm on that note, I'm going to hand over to you, and yeah, hopefully you enjoy the session, which you will do. I guarantee you will definitely enjoy this session.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Jonathan. So I hope those who are watching that you have pen and paper to hand. And I'm going to begin with a question here. And we live in uncertain times, don't we? And so this question that I want you to hold as I go through my webinar with you today is, how do you navigate uncertainty while still paying attention to your own well-being and the development of others? And just so you can orientate yourself as we go through this webinar today, I'm going to invite you to think about this in 3 sections. So the first section is going to be around just understanding what leadership, what headship is asking of you today. So we get really clear why you've shown up, why you're watching this webinar, and how it connects with your reality. We're then going to look at, well, why should any of this matter? Why should Viv Grant be getting myself, getting you to think about uncertainty of headship? Why does it matter? And for me, there's something really important around that, because I am a coach. And for me, it's something to do with, it matters because there's an inner work that needs to be attended to. And then the third bit that I'm going to get you to consider is, then if we've looked at what the reality of headship is, if we've engaged with the question, why does it matter that we turn our gaze inward? Then the third bit I'm going to invite you to consider is then, what might an alternative pathway look like? So that you watching this video, can answer this question with a greater degree of certainty. So let's begin then by looking at the reality of leading in uncertain times. And I'm going to share with you here some questions. And I'd just like you to ponder them for a while. So think about your life as a school leader. Think about the individuals that you engage with on a daily basis. What type of questions tend to dominate your life? Now, I know the answer. I know the answer from my own experience. I know the answer from those that I work with. And I hazard a guess that many of you will say the questions are to do with having to prove yourself. The questions will be to do around performance. The questions will be to around ensuring that you're not judged in a specific way. And so if we know that to be part of the reality, my second question then is, to what extent do these conversations renew and inspire you or others? Again, I know the answer to that question. And I'm sure if you're thinking and reflecting on that, you'll probably say to me, Viv, they probably don't do much to inspire me, to connect me back to my why. So in terms of understanding why that is, and why I am suggesting that we need another pathway forward to help you lead in these uncertain times, we have to recognize, don't we, that for you as a head, for you as a school leader, in terms of how you show up day in and day out, it's not what happens here above the surface, which many of your questions that people ask you are directed about. It's more to do with what's happening below the surface. And so we have to try and understand then, why is it? What is it about the nature of headship the nature of the role that you carry, why so many of the questions focus on what's above the surface. So I'm just going to share with you a few points here from a psychologist, many years, a German psychologist, Erving Goffman. And he proposed the theory in terms of leadership being similar to that of an actor on a stage. And I'm sure you can understand that. The sense being that when you're out, whether it's in the school playground, whether it's in the staff room, whether it's in the office, and you're having a meeting with a parent or some other individual, what you're having to do is to curate or to put on a performance that ensures that you get a favorable response from whoever you are engaging with. However, there's a real challenge here, isn't there? Just take a look at this picture here. If you've got my first book, Staying Ahead, you'll recognize this picture. What we realize when you're a head teacher, what we know is the reality is it's not just one audience that you are having to show up in front of day in and day out. They are a variety of audiences, each coming with their own perceptions of what leadership, of what headship is about, and actually how they think you should perform. And I think what's really important, and maybe just take a moment to pause here, how often have you sat down and enabled yourself to think about, okay, yeah, when I'm in front of these different audiences, what is the emotional and psychological toll? What is being asked of me? And if you just look here at what the front stage requires, it isn't just one attitude or one way of being. It is a whole range of ways. I once worked with a head teacher who said to me that her governors thought it would be a good idea if someone from a FTSE 100 company came in and shadowed her for the day to give her some advice. I think you can probably work out where this is going. At the end of the day, this, top exec, he said to her, I've got no advice to give you. In my role, I am paid highly and I am paid well to become an expert in one thing. I've shadowed you today. I've seen you engage with a variety of audiences. I've seen you having to switch from one way of being to another way of being. That demands far more of you than my role with my one particular focus ever asks of me. So we really need to just take account that you in your role and what you're doing, it demands a huge amount. And because it demands a huge amount, what we need to recognize is then, as well as your front stage, you need a backstage. We don't see actors rehearsing, do we? But we know they do. And it's the same for yourself as a head teacher. You need a backstage where you can just take off the head teacher persona and you can just be vulnerable. You can be yourself. You can talk about your doubts, your confusions, your ambiguities with no one judging you. Because what we need to recognize is that you're a whole human being. I often talk about a lot this concept of wholeness and what wholeness should mean for us as individuals, as human beings. If we think of kintsugi, the Japanese art form of when a plate or a bowl is broken, it's not thrown away, is it? It's glued together with this precious gold. And that pot, it becomes whole, but the cracks becoming part of what makes that pot even more unique, more precious. And I really, truly believe that is the same for headship. I know, again, from my own experience and the range of heads that I have worked with over the years, that the cracks come. And how we enable individuals to get a sense of wholeness is by attending to all these different aspects, whether it's an emotional crack, a physical, mental, or spiritual, and through a coaching conversation. We help an individual piece themselves back together again. Because what we need to understand is that this sense of what I call vocational vitality or vocational purpose, it isn't fixed. Things happen in the life of a school leader that will challenge you. And because of that, the context that we are in, that you are living in, it has to be aware of that. It has to be attuned to that to help you withstand uncertainty and the challenges that the life of a school leader brings. So how do we do that then? Well, a key way has to be by helping you attend to a deeper understanding of who you are. Something again that I always say is that headship, it changes you. No one that I've worked with has said to me, Viv, yes, I'm the same person that I was when I stepped in a year ago, 2 years ago, 10, 20 years ago. I have changed. And I know that the strongest leaders are those who've grown, I would say, in wisdom. They've gone through the difficult times, but they've been able to harvest what that has meant for their own journey of becoming. We need to attend to how do we build emotional resources? How do we help you sustain a sense of vocation and purpose? And bringing congruity to original ideas and current realities. And by that, I mean, you'll always have, well, I hope you will always have your hope, the reason why you first stepped into the profession. But equally, there are the current realities, the uncertainties, the challenges that school leadership brings today. And I know that for school leaders to sustain that course, we have to find a way to help you almost bring it be in alignment with those two tensions. So moving on to the second part of this webinar, and I have a question for you. Why should this matter to you? Just going to let that pause, let that sink in. Imagine I'm Viv Grant, I am Viv Grant, but I'm sitting with you, maybe one-on-one. And I'm saying, so you're living with these uncertainties of school leadership, the tensions that it brings. You're having to address where the fault lines have shown. Why should this matter to you? I have a very personal answer to this, which I'll share with you in a moment. But for me, I would argue this matters to you because for all of us, particularly when the key challenges come of leadership, something happens internally. And I've put here the journey inward. And I've said here, learning to walk in the dark. Because it's been my own personal experience through a number of challenges that I've had both personally and professionally. But equally, it's something that I recognize when working with head teachers and other senior school leaders, that when these challenges come, we need to almost have a new frame of reference to understand. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you're not up to the role, which is very often the inner narrative that I hear people experiencing. But what it does mean, and I just love this quote, is from an Irish Yorkshire poet, David White. And again, just take some time to think about this. He says, we must have a relationship with our work that is larger than any individual job description we are given. A real work, like a real person, grows and changes and surprises us, asking us constantly for recommitment. Again, just pause with that. I remember the first time that I came across that quote, I think it was in his book, The Three Marriages. And I remember it just really struck me how true that is, that we're changing all the time. And with every challenge, everything we go through, our roles are asking us for a recommitment to the vision, a recommitment to the purpose, a recommitment to ourselves. And something that I have noticed in education is that when we're not aware of this, our key purpose, it suffers. It suffers when external accountability perpetually trumps internal discovery, i.e., when the focus is always outward, attuned to what other people might think, attuned to the judgment of others, and therefore fear is driving our responses. The lens doesn't turn inward, does it? But what I've come to realize is when the lens does not turn inward, to a greater sense of understanding, or to go on an inquiry, as it were, then we falter. Heads falter in their leadership. And so I want to share with you here, I suppose it is quite personal, but it's a mixture really of what I've learned from coaching head teachers, my own experience as head teacher, and a very recent journey of walking through the dark myself. But I just want you to look at this. And I want you to ask yourself, how true has this been for yourself? Or what sense do you even make of this? So he's deceased now. He was a Jungian psychologist, Robert Johnson. And he said, when the time comes for the ego to set forth on its journey towards wholeness, strange and paradoxical things happen. Fate chooses strange emissaries. So let's just unpick what he's saying here. When we talk about ego, we're talking about the psychological sense of self that develops as a way to help us navigate the world. So we all will have certain aspects, certain traits that we believe to be who we are, but very much they will be our survival mechanisms. And what Robert Johnson is saying here, when the time comes, he does not use the phrase individuation. Again, it's a Jungian term, but that is really when a phrase, it means, I would say, when the time comes for us to grow up, to let go of some of our old coping and survival mechanisms. Our ego, if it knew what was coming, it would prevent it. It would prevent the journey inward. And so what Robert Johnson is saying here is, think life will take us by surprise. And again, I know for every single head teacher that I have worked with, from my own experience, the greatest growth has come, not when Viv Grant has been in control, not when I have seen the challenge that was ahead, but when it took me by surprise. So I want you to think about, as I share my reflections with you, why should it matter a turn inward when we are going through uncertainty? I want you to think about what experiences in your life as a school leader have taken you by surprise. Maybe just jot one or two down now. And I'm going to share with you a key experience that took me by surprise, but what it led to in terms of my work, continuing work with head teachers, to really enable you to become more of the stewards of the future that we need you to be. So in 2023, I was diagnosed with a rare cancer, uterine serous carcinoma, which is a cancer that is prevalent in women of colour. And I'm better now, so the first thing I should say. But at the time, as you can imagine, my world, I felt completely fallen apart. And there is a poet, again, he's deceased, John O'Donoghue. And there was a poem that I kept referring to time and time again. And the poem is called For a Friend on the Arrival of Illness. But really, it could be for a friend on the arrival of trouble, or for a friend on the arrival of disappointment. These words, I think, echo and will have resonance. And they had deep resonance for me. The lines are, may you find in yourself a courageous hospitality towards what is difficult, painful, and unknown. And I didn't know at the time, but I kept reading them because I knew I had to find a way to engage with this cancer that had entered my life. I didn't want, because of the work that I do and because of the person that I am, I didn't want to use the common language that is used around cancer. Though you're in a battle with cancer, you're fighting cancer. I kind of knew I had to show a kindness towards myself, but I didn't know how to. So this phrase, a courageous hospitality, was one that I really mulled over time and time again. And it's something now that I really invite with the school leaders that I work with. How can you find a courageous hospitality to what has entered your life now? Through this crisis that you are now facing, what is it that you need to attend to? What is it that wants to emerge through you as a result of what you're going through? Now, if we think back to the questions that I asked you to consider that you're commonly asked as a school leader, that type of question you'll rarely be asked by your school improvement advisor or by your school governors, but they are key. And they are key for these reasons. If we can't find a way to chart where what we are going through, it becomes increasingly difficult. What I learned on my journey through cancer was, when we go through these difficult times that take us by surprise, psychologically, we can actually organize them into probably 3 distinct stages. Some of you might be familiar with the phrase the soul's journey or the hero's journey, which talks about a similar arc. So there's the descent. So when that crisis, when that thing comes into our lives that pulls us away from the known, and we find ourselves falling. And then we reach, whether it's rock bottom or the belly of the well, I call it the dark night of the soul. And some way, somehow, we've got to navigate. We've got to find a way forward. It's my argument as a coach that coaching can be a really key way to help school leaders navigate the darkness, so that the self-criticism, the self-doubt doesn't become a constant companion, but you have someone who's cheerleading you and championing you on to find a way forward until you emerge in the new dawn. And I'm just going to share with you what emerged for me. So what emerged for me, I spoke about, find a courageous hospitality to what is difficult, painful, and unknown. Unbeknownst to me, what that became was painting. I have never, ever painted before, but it was painting that enabled me to find a way through my own dark night. And with that, words to understand more about the path that life was taking me on. So that first, a descent to depths unknown. Think about, again, the challenges that have come in your life as a school leader that have taken you by surprise. To what depths did they take you? I am sure they will have taken you to places inside yourself that you never, ever could have imagined. I know that, again, for many of the heads that I've worked with, they've spoken about having to come to know themselves in a different way. They've spoken about having to let go of certain ways of holding the headship role. And as I say that, I see myself rising up, because for many heads, part of that is letting go of the be strong persona, which is one that I can relate to very well. Now, Richard Rohr, he is a spiritual author, and he phrases what I said about, being taken into the unknown, something happening by surprise. And look at what he's saying here. He says, we usually don't leave home willingly. By home, he just means what we know, what's life as usual. None of us do. More often than not, we're taken away by some circumstance. Now, when we're looking at headship, as I've already said, it can be a range of things. It can be a parental complaint. Sadly, it can sometimes be a death that happens within the school community. It could be a whole range of things that it's not on your job description as a head teacher, but they are the things that will either, I suppose, enable your roots to grow deeper, or for you maybe to change track. Now, for me, it was very much a sense of when the descent came. This is one of my first paintings. And it was really, I felt my own inner wisdom. I use the word soul at times, was saying to me, Viv, you are entering a dark night, but your roots will go deeper as a result of the process. But I didn't realize that at the time. I just drew this, I just painted this, but not really consciously being aware of what was being conveyed to me. Then we have navigating the darkness. And for me, this is really important. What I see happen with so many head teachers, when you're in that time, when you're in the belly of the well, what tends to happen is you draw on your default ways of being. So you try to rationalize, you try to work your way out of this problem. You're holding on to your old ways of being in the role. And what Thomas More means here when he says, don't let your day world bias interfere, He's saying here, rationality, trying to solve everything through just thinking things through isn't necessarily going to help you navigate the dark night. It might to a certain degree, but not totally. Because what's happening here, as I've alluded to already, is there's an inner purging of all that once felt so real. Your ego defenses, how you were maybe so good at really battling your way through, how you were so good at being someone who was armor clad and nothing could get through. But what happens in this dark night is that your journey of becoming says, I need you to be more. There's a shadow aspect of this being in the world that you need to integrate. And so slowly but surely, what can happen is through conversations with someone who's holding you, with someone who's got you there, they're enabling you to identify, oh, something is changing within me. I'm no longer afraid. I can think of an individual that I worked with. And for that individual, their particular dark night was to do with, actually, I've spoken about this, letting go of the be strong persona. They'd been one of those turnaround heads who'd always go into schools, who'd always turn schools around, but he never built relationships. He'd got used to sort of pressing down I wouldn't so much call it anxiety, but that feeling really of not being liked and of not being respected. And his dark night came through really a type of depression, but he didn't even know that's what it was because he'd got used to that. And through us working together, his hint of spring beginning to return was when he realized, and he said to me towards the end of our sessions, Viv, I've made a decision. I'm not going to leave this school. This local authority, they've asked me to go to another school and turn it around. I'm not going to do that, Viv. I've learned through working with you how to be kind to myself. And in being kind to myself, how I can be kind to others and still get the best from them. I'm going to stay, Viv. I'm going to stay at this school. Because normally, as I said, he would go on to another school and another school. So he stayed at that school until he retired. And that was him getting. So in our conversations, the hint of spring returning was him being able to see himself in a new way and to be the leader that he knew he could be. And then what we have with that then, as this slide says here, we have to return to where we started and know it in a new way and do life in a new way. And that's the invitation to all of you watching this video today. Through your dark night, where are you now with it? Have you been able to identify what your dark night is asking you to let go of? And if you have you been able to identify the hints of spring, the new ways of being that life is asking of you? And these are important questions because, again, as Richard Rohr says, unless we somehow chart this trajectory, we have no way to discern growth and what might be a fuller or fullest human response. So just sit with that and ask yourself, wherever you are right now, do you know? Do you have a way? Do you have the tools, the resources, the people to help you reframe your experience, to help you hold on to the vision of yourself that is coming into view, even though you might not have a view of it? Do you have others who can say, hey, I can see what you're going through, but you know what? It's all right, because I can see what's on the horizon, what's waiting for you. And I know the questions to ask you to enable you to move further on your journey. I've already shared that one. So this final part is then, if your answer to that is no, then I want to share with you a way that might help you to really be able to chart the journey that you are on, a way that might help you to navigate a way forward. So as a result, I shared with you that I'd had this cancer diagnosis 2 years ago, and I was on this journey. And through this journey, what it led me to do was to eventually write a book. I never, ever imagined on my cancer journey that this would come out of it. So Learning to Walk in the Dark, it was published a year ago on World Cancer Day. And within Learning to Walk in the Dark, it's a way to chart the trajectory. It's to chart how you can map and be in right relationship with. How can you engender that hospitality towards yourself? And what we've done with this book is we have put it into a program for head teachers. And I'm just going to share with you some details about that. So they're Learning to Walk in the Dark coaching circles. And they are small groups of just between 6 to 8 individuals. The term I use is professional intimacy. We create spaces with myself leading those groups where individuals can show up. So I mentioned earlier about the ego defenses, where you can show up and not think, oh God, my school's not at this position on the league tables. Oh my God, I've got Ofsted coming. Or, oh my God, my year 6s or my year 2s. There's none of that. It's not about showing up to perform. It's all to do with just showing up as you. And showing up as you, just being human, just being whole. And in those head teacher coaching circles, which run from May to November, we allow you to think about your leadership being like a tree. And as I said earlier, enabling you to think about what are the roots of my being really? The roots that need to be tended to in terms of my vocational purpose. And we ask you to consider, so really, this journey, these are the type of questions that I invite heads who come on the program to consider. Reflecting on your highs and lows, and obviously we go through these in greater depth with each of the sessions. There are 6 sessions, between May and November. A reflective journal accompanies them. But just to give you a sense of the type of questions, you're invited to engage with questions such as, what leadership behaviours have you focused on that have been around survival, approval, control, or image? Again, not the type of questions you're typically asked. What may have been gained, lost, or compromised? But again, really important questions, because what I'm inviting individuals to do is to pause and to really think about the journey of becoming, to encourage you to think about what has shaped you along the way. And for me, what's really important is we all carry a story. There is a story that you will have carried when you first took on the role of headship. And that story is changing all of the time. Different chapters are closing, different chapters are being written. And I encourage you to think about what is the story about your leadership that is beginning to emerge for you. And alongside that, are woven in these 5 C's of what I call inner leadership. Again, when I was going through my cancer journey and coming out the other side and writing the book, became very clear to me that if we are to enable ourselves when we go through life's challenges, but equally yourselves as head teachers, how can we enable you to foster and be really mindful of key attributes, key ways of being with self and others that enable us to navigate difficult times? So through the head teacher coaching circles, we have these threads where we enable you to understand what curiosity might look like as opposed to judgment. That sense of recommitting to staying on the road when it gets difficult. Understanding that courage isn't all about braving it out, but it's about how we embrace vulnerability. Having the compassion to really treat oneself with kindness. And for me, really importantly, connection. What I see too often in headship, and thinking back to that question I asked you at the beginning, how do we manage uncertainty? How do we stay attuned to what's happening in the world while still staying attuned to our own well-being and that of others? what I too often see is a disconnect to self and others when the pressures come. The pressures just seem to be so all-consuming that what tends to happen is that we forget that actually I am in relationship with others. It was Martin Luther King who said that, you know, when we look at well-being, we can't look at it as an individualistic pursuit. We can only really talk about well-being when we can say, I am well in the world because others are well in the world. And I think that is so important for the times that we are living in today and the uncertainty that we need to navigate. So if you are interested in this program, and I really hope that you are, because I would so love to walk alongside you. I am passionate about supporting head teachers, and I'm passionate about enabling you to go on a deeper journey that this role is asking of you. So here is an overview of the program, and you can see in more detail the themes that are covered. So, you know, the need for a new kind of leadership, which is what I hope I've given you a sense of today. Why do we need a new kind of leadership? The times we're living in are more polarized than ever before. And that means that more is being asked of us who say that we are leaders, who choose to show up and lead. But if we don't put ourselves in the environments to enable us to understand what is being asked of us, then actually, rather than being a solution to the problems that the world is facing today, we actually replicate unknowingly some of the harms. So it's so important that we're able to engage with that. And then, as you can see, we go through all the different aspects. And then finally, this whole bit, leading with wisdom, revisioning the future. Because what's so important here is that, you know, as James Hollis says, as long as choices are not consciously and freshly made in contexts which are constantly shifting, virtue may prove unvirtuous. So we have to be attuned, don't we? We have to be attuned to what is being asked of us in these times, so that you can be the leaders that our young people, that your staff and colleagues are asking of you. And this is what a colleague said on the program that we ran last year. She said, personally, it's taken me on a journey of the highs and lows of headship in a very supportive and safe environment. Viv's passion for the work she does enabled this to be delivered personally in a unique way with deep and meaningful self-reflection as a leader. So if that's something that resonates for you, and I really hope that it does, then show yourself some kindness, prioritize the meeting of your needs. And as I said, I would love to journey with you. So if you'd like to find out more, we have our lovely Hannah. You can simply email her on this address, or you can take an image of the QR code, a picture, and that will take you straight to the page where you can find out more about the program. So go well. You do an amazing role as head teacher. Our young people, they are looking to you, and thank you for the work that you do.
I did say what a powerful session that is. I'm going to ask some questions because in the community we get quite a few things that come up quite a lot, and it centers around coaching. And one of the key themes is, should I get a coach, and how do I agree having a coach when everything else is, we can't afford anything in the school in some ways? How do you justify it to a school leader or a governor?
So many responses to that, Jonathan. I think one argument I would say is, well, what happens when you don't get that support? I know from my own experience, I know they don't make the best, they continue to, so they rely on their default ways of being. So they're stuck in a way of responding to the challenges of their role. And what I see then eventually happen is they reach the edge of burnout, or they burn out. And then the cost to the school to replace them, to cover sick leave, is much higher. I know from the heads that we work with and again, will come with some of those similar reservations, but then it's, oh my goodness, I didn't realize when they make, because it's an investment in self. And it's Parker Palmer who says self-care is never a selfish act. And I think that heads think, oh, it's selfish to just focus on myself. But it really, really isn't. You know, they're the highest paid member of staff. And therefore, it's about recognizing what is being asked of you. You're being asked to lead wisely and with wisdom. And it's hard. And you can't do that journey by yourself.
No, I totally agree. As you know, I totally agree with that in some ways. Another part is how do you then also convince school members to have coaching as well? Because I was coaching in school for many years, and sometimes it was really hard to justify the benefit of coaching when they said, oh, all you're doing is asking questions. But it's more than that, isn't it?
I really think it's to do with actually building a coaching culture. And I really think actually it goes back, because it's to do, for me, the way that I look at it is it goes back to the why. So why did you step into education in the first place? And a bit like I shared on the webinar, when we get people to engage with what is teaching asking of me right now, it is tough. Sometimes I feel like this, I can feel the negative thoughts flooding in X, Y, and Z. Okay, so would you like things to be different? How would it be if you could reconnect back to your why? So that's how I always think about it. It's a connecting back to why. It's reframing what it means to be an educator. You can tell I just feel that so strongly. And it's when we can enable people to see that the questions that we are asking go to the heart of who you are. And for me, magic happens, a reconnection with, with our core purpose as educators. So it's bigger. I just think it's back to the why, and why do we choose to, work in schools, be with our young people.
Yep. I again totally agree. Another question was comes up quite often is coaching versus supervision. And actually, should I have both, or should I have one or the other? What's your opinion of that?
See, I think there can be a lot of crossover, and I think it depends in terms of what the individual is actually dealing with. In fact, so if say, for example, it's more to do with, let's just think. So if I start with why I think coaching, first of all, because that's what I'm most familiar with. With coaching, I would definitely say if it's about improving your performance and how you wish to be as a leader and greater self-understanding, then coaching. But supervision, and we have supervision as a team, if, for example, it's something where it's about, I don't know, maybe an individual or a situation has occurred. This is where there can be a crossover, because you can do that in coaching as well. But I think where supervision can help is if there is a risk of boundaries being crossed, and if there is a way in terms of there's more that a psychological level or a counselling level that needs to be taken into account of, then supervision. But there can be quite a bit of crossover from my experience.
I think that's what some school leaders are worrying about. Actually, in some place, in real terms, because the school leaders have much more safeguarding, they should have that supervision and the coaching, because they should be two separate conversations. Because in coaching, you're trying to develop the person, and in supervision, it's actually reflection and sort of like a support program for you to deal with the stresses and the trauma aspect of schools.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, what you were raising there, Jonathan, just in terms of the supervision and safeguarding and what we're seeing in schools now, and just that, that heightened level in terms of need, then, what we recognize is that I will almost call it like a safe container needs to be for school leaders, because they're in a sense, they're having to contain everyone else's emotions and trauma. They need a place for themselves where they have that safe container.
Sounds good. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. As always, it's always a a pleasure to listen to you talking and your journey and things like that. And I hope many people join in. Quite a few people watched it today. So, and I hope quite a few people will join in with your course, because it sounds amazing. So thank you very much again.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Take care now.
Thank you, everyone.